Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, if you are currently wading through the massive amount of material for your history revision and you're focusing on the origins of the Cultural Revolution in China, well, this deep dive is for you. We are aiming to give you that knowledge shortcut, the key insights and the analysis you really need to nail those causation questions.
Exactly. Our mission today is to really dissect that crucial period between 1962 and 1966. And these 4 years, they weren't just a slow drift into conflict. It was more of a deliberate, almost calculated construction of the mechanisms, both political and, personal, that turned what was an internal party disagreement into a decade of nationwide chaos. We need to unpack that power struggle, the ideological split, and how Mao systematically built this personality cult to strike back at his own government.
So let's start at the beginning of the end, so to speak.
Okay.
What is the fundamental issue? What truly underlay the power struggle that just explodes between 1962 and 1966? It all really starts with cleaning up a catastrophe.
That catastrophe, of course, was the failure of the Great Leap Forward, a massive failure. The famine and the economic collapse that followed forced Mao Zedong to step back from the day-to-day running of the state.
Which opens up a power vacuum.
A temporary vacuum, yes, at the very top of the Chinese Communist Party.
And so stepping into that vacuum were the pragmatists.
Yeah.
We're talking about figures like Liu Shaoqi, who was the president of the PRC, Deng Xiaoping, and the economic planner Chen Yun. They had this unenviable job of reversing the crisis and, most importantly, just getting food production going again.
And their solution was, in its own way, revolutionary, but revolutionary in its moderation. They looked at the immediate needs and they concluded that the only way forward was a huge reversal of collectivization.
So allowing private farming.
Yes, allowing private farming, local markets, letting peasants keep a little bit of land, some stock. This kind of incentive just immediately boosted production.
It works. It fixes the famine,
Yeah.
but in doing so, it creates this massive ideological canyon. For Mao, this wasn't just an economic fix, it was political treason.
Yes. He saw it as a complete abandonment of the core collectivist principle.
And we really need to understand what that means for him, right?
We do. For a committed Marxist like Mao, social progress could only be achieved by the working class, the proletariat, acting as one collective body, so allowing individual peasants to chase private profit. That was a fundamental violation. It was a retreat from socialism. It was giving in to, selfish capitalist ideas.
And he took it very, very personally. We know from records that he was just furious. He felt Liu and Deng were actively undermining his entire legacy.
He reportedly said they treated him like a dead man at his own funeral, just waiting for the chance to push him out for good.
So the very success of their economic policies was, in Mao's eyes, proof of their betrayal.
Exactly. The irony is that their success in fixing the economy was the proof he needed that they had abandoned the revolution. They chose stability over ideological purity.
So that brings us to this huge ideological choice for China. It's no longer just about economic recovery. It's about what kind of future China wants. Is it revolutionary fire or is it pragmatic growth?
That's the schism. That's the core conflict. And, to help visualize this, it's useful to think about the political spectrum that was forming inside the party. You can kind of break it down into three camps.
Okay, so on one side you have the pragmatists,
Yeah.
as Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping.
Right. Their agenda was pretty straightforward. Relax controls, focus on the economy, and accept that, maybe some non-Maoist methods were necessary just for the state to survive.
And on the other end,
The far left, the Maoists or the hardliners. This group included people like Lin Biao, Mao's wife Jiang Qing, and a group of radicals based in Shanghai. For them, it was revolution above all else. Political conformity had to come before any economic method, even if that meant more hardship.
and you mentioned a center.
Yes, figures like Chen Boda, who often drifted towards whoever held power. But the key thing to remember is that even though Mao wasn't running daily policy, he was still the ultimate ideological reference point. The hardliners always pointed back to him.
So this wasn't just some debate in a meeting room. This was a fight for the soul of the country.
It really was. The pragmatists thought the party's job was to govern a modern state. The Maoists believed the party's job was to maintain a state of permanent revolution.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The power struggle moves from defense to offense. Mao realizes he can't rely on the party structure anymore.
Because it's filled with what he'll later call capitalist rotors.
Exactly. So he needs a new mechanism, a new weapon.
Yeah.
And this is where the deliberate creation of his personality cult becomes so critical. And it's largely engineered by Lin Biao.
Lin Biao is absolutely central here. You can't understand the Cultural Revolution without him. When he becomes defense minister in 1959, he starts serving Mao's goals in this remarkable way. He doesn't just praise Mao.
No, he turns him into something else.
He turns him into a kind of god, the embodiment of wisdom, the outstanding interpreter of class struggle. He elevates Mao above politics.
And the strategy there is pure genius, in a way. If Mao is the final word on revolutionary truth, the successor to Marx, Lenin, Stalin, then disagreeing with him isn't just a policy dispute.
It makes you a heretic, an enemy of the revolution itself.
And the physical tool for this was the Little Red Book.
Quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong, compiled by Chen Boda and, crucially, published in a small, pocket-sized format so it could be carried everywhere.
And the scale of this operation is just mind-boggling.
It is. Within just a couple of years, over 740 million copies are distributed. It was everywhere. Schools, factories, fields. Mao's thoughts were inescapable.
The best way to think about it is like China's secular Bible.
That's a perfect way to put it. It was the ultimate source of truth. It was given as a wedding gift. That level of ideological saturation meant Mao could now speak directly to the people, completely bypassing the party leadership of Lu Yun and Deng.
But a cult needs muscle, right? It needs an enforcement arm.
And that vehicle was the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. Under Lin Biao, the PLA stops being just a military force. Lin Biao himself declared it was an armed force for carrying out the political tasks of the revolution.
That shift is fundamental, isn't it?
It's everything. It means Mao now has a loyal, politically indoctrinated army that is separate from the government structure run by his rivals. The PLA provided the military and popular backing that was absolutely essential for what came next.
So by 1963, Mao has his motive, reversing the pragmatists, and he has his mechanism, the cult and the PLA. Now he needs a trigger, a way to start the fight.
And that first step was the Socialist Education Movement, or SM, from 1963 to 64. This was Mao's attempt to radicalize the party from the bottom up, to root out corruption with something called the Four Cleanups.
He suspected local officials were getting lazy, maybe even corrupt.
Exactly. Becoming revisionist profiteering, losing their revolutionary spirit.
But here's the twist. Liu Shaoqi is still president, so he's tasked with running the SM. And he actually goes on an inspection tour with his wife.
He does, and what he finds confirms Mao's suspicions. Yes, there are reactionary elements. Yes, they're being protected by higher-ups.
So you'd think he'd pivot and follow Mao's radical line.
But he doesn't. He confirms the problem exists, but he continues to prioritize moderate economic policies and a very cautious, controlled implementation of the SEM. He was trying to contain the disruption.
And how did Mao see that?
As deliberate sabotage. He was convinced Liu and Deng were actively undermining him. This is when he summons Liu and publicly accuses him of supporting the capitalist roaders.
That term, capitalist roaders.
Yeah.
It's so important for anyone studying this period. What does it actually mean?
It's Mao's ultimate political insult. It describes party members who, on the surface are communists, but secretly they're using capitalist methods that he believes will lead China away from socialism.
And he also called them Khrushchev-type revisionists.
Yes, which is a direct jab at the Soviet leader who had denounced Stalin and promoted moderation. For Mao, suggesting his colleagues were like, Khrushchev was the worst kind of ideological betrayal.
So the fight is now public. It's intensely personal. And the attacks get more indirect, these proxy attacks. The key one comes in 1965, centered on a play by a man named Wu Han.
Ah, the Wuhan incident. It's a masterpiece of political maneuvering. Wu Han was a historian, and his play, The Dismissal of Hai Rui from Office, was seized on by the Maoists, led by Jiang Qing.
And the play itself is about an old Ming Dynasty official who criticizes the emperor and gets fired for it.
Precisely. The Maoists brilliantly reinterpreted the play. They said it wasn't about the Ming Dynasty at all. They claimed it was a subtle defense of Peng Dehuai.
The defense minister who was purged for criticizing the Great Leap Forward.
Exactly. So by attacking the play, they could indirectly attack all of Mao's opponents, the pragmatists like Liu and Deng, who were seen as sympathetic to Peng's more moderate views.
And this really shows the rise of Jiang Qing and her allies, the future Gang of Four. They understood you could weaponize culture.
Absolutely. The Gang of Four Zhang Chunqi, Yao Wenyuan, Wang Hongwen, with Jiang Qing as the leader, they were radical zealots. Jiang Qing accused the entire cultural establishment of betraying the revolution. This cultural battlefield was the perfect staging ground for the real political assault to come.
So by early 1966, Mao has used these proxy wars to isolate his opponents. What's the final step to actually launch the revolution?
The final organizational step was creating the structure to do it, and that was the Central Cultural Revolution Group, the CCRG, set up in May 1966.
This was the instrument of war.
It was. Technically, it was a subcommittee of the Politburo, but it was completely dominated by Maoists. And crucially, Mao set it up by totally bypassing the established party hierarchy.
Bypassing Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping.
He sidelined them almost overnight, despite them holding the highest offices in the state. The CCRG gave Mao his own loyal command center to launch his attack without needing approval from the very people he was about to purge.
And it all culminates on May 16th, 1966.
Right.
This is Mao's formal declaration of war on his own party.
The official document, his notification, it leaves no room for doubt. It states that representatives of the bourgeoisie have sneaked into the party and are ready to seize power. He warns the whole country about these Khrushchev-type revisionists. That announcement was the green light. It formally triggered the Cultural Revolution and basically gave permission for the masses, especially the Young Red Guards, to attack the very institutions Liu and Deng were in charge of.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces together for your revision. What does this all mean? The origins of the Cultural Revolution aren't simple. They're a complex convergence of factors.
When you synthesize it all, the causes really boil down to four critical things. First, the GLF policy failure, which created the initial power struggle.
Right.
Second, that fundamental ideological schism between Mao's revolutionary zealots and the economic pragmatists. Third, the deeply personal power struggle. You can't forget that Mao felt personally betrayed. And finally, the political mechanism he built to fight back. Lin Biao's cult of Mao and the loyalty of the PLA.
So these figures, Liu, Deng, Lin Biao, and the Gang of Four, are the essential players you have to understand to explain why China just plunged into a decade of chaos.
Yeah.
The origins were political, ideological, and deeply, deeply personal.
And here's a final thought for you to consider as you wrap up your study of this. Just think about the immediate impact of the CCRG. This was a small, unelected subcommittee. In May 1966, this little group managed to sideline the two highest-ranking officials in the entire country almost overnight. What does that one fact tell you about where the true source of power in China was at that exact moment? And how completely Mao had already separated his own authority from the official structures of government? Something to chew on as you continue your revision.